As we were learning about, there are four major types of macromolecules, or sometimes we call them biomolecules, that we use to study in biology. The first type is carbohydrates, and that's that blue picture with the ring molecules up here on the top left. And it's just like it sounds, carbo, it's got a lot of carbon in it, and hydrates, it's got what hydrates you? Water. So it's got H, hydrogen, and O, oxygen. So carbohydrates, they have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Then next to it at the top right are lipids. That's a model of a cell membrane, which is made up of phospholipids. Lipids are better known as fats. Proteins always look like they're throwing a party and they have curlicues. Proteins are what builds our muscles, all the structures in our body, and enzymes, which is very important. And lastly, nucleic acids like DNA and RNA. And that bottom right is a picture of DNA. So we learned previously that the macromolecules are polymers, and polymers are made up of many monomers. And so the top one is protein. It's monomers, amino acid. The amino acids join together. We call that polymer or polypeptide, which is going to go on to make a muscle filament, which is a protein. Or the second one is a nucleotide, which joins together to make a DNA strand, which is the polymer, which eventually is going to be part of a chromosome. Or the third one down, monosaccharide, is the monomer of carbohydrates. Those monosaccharides are going to join together to make a complex carbohydrate like a starch. And those starches are going to be within the chloroplast, the site of photosynthesis. And they're going to be used for structure or for energy. And then the bottom one is a fatty acid. Those fatty acids join together to make a fat molecule, and the fat molecule is going to be your polymer, and they're going to go to make the fat cells that insulate your body or give your body cushion. So the first thing that we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about this in a few parts, it's carbohydrates. And the purpose of carbohydrates is short-term energy. You think of a sugar rush, right? So you have two main types of carbohydrates. Complex and simple. Simple are your sugars, complex are going to be your starches. So if you eat any of those, they're going to be short-term energy. Let's pretend you just ate a big bowl of noodles, nothing else on them, just plain noodles. My kids do it all the time. They will come back in about an hour and say, I'm still hungry. Even though it was a big bowl of noodles, your body is able to break those down quickly and give you energy from them. Same thing with sugars. So there are also ways that it can be used for structure and support, particularly in plant cells. There's something called cellulose, and that makes the cell walls that give the plant their structure. So some examples are the complex carbs like starches, simple carbs like sugars, and we're going to talk more about glycogen in just a sec. Our favorite carbohydrate that we talk about over and over and over in this class is glucose. C6H12O6. And carbohydrates, just like they sound, they contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. That's it. That's all they contain. And our favorite sugar is glucose, and its formula is C6H12O6. C6, I'm going to try to draw this, H12O6. So that means that in a molecule of glucose, there are 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen atoms, 6 oxygen atoms. All right, so the monomer of a carbohydrate is called a monosaccharide. So it's easy to remember that a monosaccharide is a monomer because they start the same way. Just a hard part to remember, saccharide. I don't know if you can think of saccharin is that fake sugar that comes in the pink packets on the table. That kind of helps me remember it. So a monosaccharide, a single packet of sugar. And these are going to be simple sugar molecules. Like I said, glucose is our favorite. Lactose is another one, also another one called galactose. Those two just join together to make the milk sugar. And fructose is another one. You might have heard of high fructose corn syrup. It comes from fruits and other plant parts. So the polymer, it's easy to remember that this is a polymer because it starts with poly, are the polysaccharides. They're going to be the large molecules. So the main ones that we talk about are starches. Our starches we eat a lot in our foods like potatoes, rice, breads, pasta, any type of grain typically contains a lot of starches. Our body can store just a little bit of carbohydrate, and animals store it in the form of glycogen. And it can be stored in our muscles, and then we can use it for exercise. Our body produces it from the carbs that we eat from our liver. Our liver is in charge of producing it, and then it gets stored in our muscles. Once you've used up all your glycogen, then you go into using fat for energy. And the other one that we talk a lot about is cellulose, which is plant starch. And if you've ever tried to eat like okra that has gone too much and it's like not chewable, or part of a plant that's not chewable, typically it's gotten a lot of cellulose in it and it's starchy and we don't really break it down. You have to have bacteria in your gut to break it down. Like horses can eat grass because they can break down the cellulose. Okay, so I was saying that this is a good source of quick energy. If you eat any carbohydrates, you get 4 calories per gram. And I don't know if there's an easy place to put this in your notes, so just write it out to the side, but that's important to know. 4 calories per gram. So if you had 1 gram of carbohydrates, like 1 gram of sugar, you would get 4 calories from that. So if you ate 10 grams of sugar, you would get 40 calories. And so our body breaks down carbohydrates as our first source of energy to be used. So you don't have to write this down. This is just to learn a little bit about this. One of the processes that breaks down carbohydrates is called cellular respiration. We'll do a whole unit that's focused on photosynthesis and cellular respiration. When we break down carbohydrates, the energy that's stored in the bonds, because those 2 atoms are joined together by a bond, and when we break it down, the bond is broken, and that energy is released, and that released energy can be converted into usable energy to power our muscles, to make our heart beat, to help us with digestion, to help our brain power. So that's why if you're trying to think with no breakfast, you have a harder time because you're having to dip into your fat stores, which is a more complex process. Breaking down carbohydrates, really simple process.